I'm News4 Jackson Chief Meteorologist David Heckard. Well, 30 years ago on March 13th, we were dealing with a historic weather event across our area. Some of you may actually remember this. This was the 1993 Superstorm, also known as the storm of the century. This absolutely rocked portions of southeast Georgia, northeast Florida, and would go on to become an all-time winter storm across sections of the mid-Atlantic and northeast. So how did this system actually develop? Well, it was nothing really spectacular on March the 12th. It was a little area of low pressure that had developed off the coast of Texas and Mexico. However, the subtropical jet was pushing its way much further to the south than normal, and that allowed the system to rapidly intensify. In fact, by the evening hours on March the 12th, it was in the Gulf of Mexico as a rapidly deepening area of low pressure, and this cold front actually drug in significant cold air, which was a major player for the snow event that was to occur later on in the parts of the mid-Atlantic and northeast. It continued to work its way through the Gulf of Mexico. In fact, in the early morning hours on March 13th, the worst of the weather had cleared the Jacksonville area, but we were dealing with some significant wind behind the system and also some significant cold air that was pouring in all the way south into parts of Cuba and the Florida Keys. The system would go on to continue to intensify, working its way up into parts of the mid-Atlantic and northeast states, where it would become a very significant wind snowmaker and also some coastal flooding, with a lot of homes in Long Island and the Outer Banks of North Carolina becoming completely inhabitable. But here in Florida, the big headline was the wind. We had what's called a derecho that developed out here. That's a squall line of showers and thunderstorms that was long-lived, and it basically blasted through the entire Florida peninsula. Every dot you see here is a wind report, and you can see some of these wind reports are just stunning. 109-mile-per-hour wind report at Key West, Florida, had a 96-mile-an-hour wind report outside Tampa, and a 74-mile-an-hour wind report up in the parts of Clay County. The other concern was tornadoes with this derecho. Unfortunately, there were some significant tornadoes, including an EF0, actually did some damage to the Jacksonville airport, and there were a couple EF2s that developed into parts of central Florida. But that alone was not the storyline with this storm of the century. We also dealt with some significant coastal flooding and even a storm surge event in the parts of the Gulf Coast region. This area here saw some significant surge in the Nature Coast all the way back into parts of the Big Bend of Florida. In fact, some areas picked up 12 feet of storm surge. That was completely unanticipated, and it did result in some deaths, unfortunately, due to drowning on some of these homes right along the Nature Coast and the Big Bend area. Of course, this system would go on to become a significant, and I mean a significant, snowfall maker. You can see much of the northeast and southeast dealt with some big-time snows, including many of the big cities in the northeast. Cities like Boston, New York, Philadelphia, D.C., right along that I-95 corridor ended up with about a foot of snow. But these pockets of red you see here, mountains of New York State back through parts of Pennsylvania, that's where they picked up over 30 inches of snow. And this was a significant snowmaker across much of the southeast. Atlanta had 4 inches of snow, but you can see some higher amounts in the parts of Alabama, eastern sections of Tennessee. Even Jacksonville reported some flurries with this system when it was all said and done. So 30 years ago, the 1993 Superstorm, one that's going to be for the record books. The good news is technology has improved significantly, so when another storm like this develops, we'll likely give it an even bigger heads up of what is about to occur in this area. I'm Assistant Chief Meteorologist David Heckard for Channel 4, the local station.